We all likely have that friend or family member that tends to stretch the boundaries of believability when telling a story or recounting certain events, and they're often so entertaining that we kindly let them get away with it. After all, who doesn't like a good old fish story that keeps getting more and more outlandish every time the tale's told? Like the now legendary story about the huge one that got away, that would have made the perfect trophy over the mantle. If only the line hadn't broken, the reel hadn't melted because of the friction from the giant fish's ferocity, or the grizzly bear that hadn't attacked at that very moment. Well, in a similar fashion, among the scientific community, the evolution-believing component has often produced many fanciful stories promoting several so-called proofs of evolution over the years. And in all of the 25 years of ministry I've had dealing with the creation-evolution debate, there was one specific proof I remember that received more fanfare, starting way back in 2006, than I'd ever seen before. And it wasn't so much the specific claims that evolutionists were making, but more so just how elated the evolutionary community was upon its announcement and the way they went about promoting it. And that was the tale of the finely finned so-called fishapod known as Tiktaalik rosé. The euphoria that grew in the evolutionary community upon the release of the Nature magazine article describing its discovery grew to a mild frenzy, especially amongst the atheist types. The article confidently declared that Tiktaalik represents an intermediate between fish with fins and four-legged tetrapods with limbs, and was from then on hyped as convincing proof of the story of evolution in amazing ways. In behind it came reports, articles, TV specials by the likes of Sir David Attenborough, complete with CGI sequences of Tiktaalik, etc., that all proclaimed this was rock-solid proof that over millions of years, fish sprouted legs and walked onto the land where they could breathe air, eventually turning into amphibians, reptiles, mammals, etc. It was as if atheists everywhere thought they'd finally found the silver bullet that would finally prove evolution as fact and that God didn't exist. And understand, I'm not overstating the evolutionary community's affection and blatant promotion of this fossil as the in-your-face proof of evolution. The New York Times claimed Tiktaalik was a powerful rebuttal to religious creationists who hold a literal biblical view of the origins and development of life. As a matter of fact, a song about Tiktaalik, still available on YouTube with over 200,000 views, complete with several comments mocking creationists, was written and played with glee by evolutionists celebrating their fishapod animal ancestry and embracing their inner fish. It was an amazing thing to watch human beings around the world essentially celebrating that they were simply evolved animals, descendants of a fishy forerunner brought about by accidental events in a world where there isn't any ultimate meaning or purpose to life. It was like watching Romans 1 play itself out before your eyes. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator. Romans 1, verses 22 to 25. Of course, rabid atheist Richard Dawkins, author of evolution and promoting books such as The Greatest Show on Earth, couldn't help but join in the celebration, declaring, "Tiktaalik is the perfect missing link. Perfect because it almost exactly splits the difference between fish and amphibian, and perfect because it's missing no longer." And this celebratory support made sense considering his atheistic worldview. After all, Dawkins himself says that we live in a universe which has no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. It's always intrigued me how atheists want to celebrate a meaningless existence and strive so hard to deconstruct those who profess faith in God. But of course, I used to do the same myself when I believed in evolution. It's like the old saying goes, misery loves company. And atheists made sure to use Tiktaalik to win as many over to their side as they could. Case in point, in an article from American Scientist, the author chided creationists and intelligent design advocates for thinking there were too few missing links for evolution to be viable, and yet hoped Tiktaalik might win them over. Intelligent design advocates and creationists claim that too many links are missing for evolution to be credible. They see only the abrupt appearance of new forms created by an intelligent designer. Stephen Meyer of the Discovery Institute asserts that the transitional life forms that ostensibly occupy the nodes of Darwin's branching tree of life are unobservable. The highly observable Tiktaalik is exactly the sort of transitional form that Meyer maintains does not exist. The fossils are real and solid evidence that you can hold in your hand. It joins myriad other found links that document transitions from one type of creature to another, or from one habitat to another. Together, these found links form a stony edifice in support of evolutionary theory. With luck, its existence may spark others to rethink their position too. Surprisingly, the article titled Missing Links and Found Links also touted the famed dino bird Archaeopteryx as another of the supposed myriad of other found missing links, saying, "The feathers and wings on these 150 million-year-old fossils qualify Archaeopteryx for the title of first bird." Apparently, this contributor to American Scientist isn't aware that evolutionists have already found fossils of true birds supposedly 60 million years older than Archaeopteryx, and did so almost 30 years before he wrote that article. Now, it's likely that one of the reasons why this supposed evidence for evolution was so overhyped is that the whole idea of a fish with legs has become somewhat symbolic of the evolutionary worldview, in opposition to biblical Christianity, as many evolutionists display the Darwin fish symbol on the back of their cars, clothing, ball caps, as a public declaration of their allegiance to the atheistic story of evolution. And this illustrates why these issues are so important for Christians to understand from a biblical worldview. Because many believers, seeing the utter mess that our Western culture has collapsed into, simply don't get how this happened, when it's literally under their very nose every time they drive in their car. They'll see a Christian fish or a Darwin fish on the vehicle in front of them, but many miss the significance of the contrast in worldviews between the two. And so the significance of news reports like the discovery of a fishapod usually fly over their heads. Meanwhile, that same so-called evidence is being used to indoctrinate their children into a naturalistic worldview in the local public school. Think about it. What motivates people that are willing to go down to the local store and plunk down $20 so they can put a Christian or Darwin fish on their car? What are they saying about what they believe where they came from, ultimately? Christian fish, I came from an all-loving God. Darwin fish, I came from pond scum. And one might be tempted to simply leave it at that, but if you think about it a little deeper, it means, Christian fish, I was created, God owns me, and I'm responsible to him. Darwin fish, no one owns me, and I'm responsible to only myself. You think that's a stretch? Well, look at this quote from atheist Jeremy Rifkin. "We no longer feel ourselves to be guests in someone else's home and therefore obliged to make our behavior conform with a set of pre-existing cosmic rules. It's our creation now. We make the rules. We establish the parameters of reality. We create the world, and because we do, we no longer have to justify our behavior, for we are now the architects of the universe. We are responsible to nothing outside of ourselves, for we are the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever." You see, the natural consequences of teaching the story of evolution is ultimately atheism. It fulfills the requirements of what all atheists believe. There is no creator, everything just makes itself over millions of years. So, although atheists claim they remove religion from government schools, they removed only Christianity and replaced it with the religion of atheistic humanism, based on their foundational doctrine, the story of evolution. And atheism removes accountability for your sinful actions. Because if the story of evolution were true, then the idea of absolute morality would be destroyed, and society would reflect such thinking. And you only need to look at the nonsense going on in culture today to do with the topic of identity to see that. So, having answers for claims against your faith is important, even if it's from just a funny-looking fishapod that's supposedly the hands-down argument against the Genesis creation account. So, what about that fishapod fable? Well, even though you can still find older articles still posted and many streaming sites still full of older videos, the hype surrounding good old Tiktaalik has nearly all but faded away. Why? Well, once again, evolutionists paid the price for their premature promotion of this supposedly positive proof of evolution with the discovery of some fossil footprints found in Poland of a tetrapod creature that preceded the existence of good old Tiktaalik by millions of years, according to their evolutionary timescale. So, the famous fishapod was a little late to the evolutionary party and not the missing link it had been declared to be. And understand, this wasn't some minor upset to the evolutionary community, because what it means is that Tiktaalik was suddenly demoted to an evolutionary dead end, and all the neat evolutionary diagrams that clearly displayed the supposed transition from fish to four-footed animal ancestor was now just bunk. The magnitude of this reversal can be seen in the numerous backtracking statements that suddenly came from a variety of scientific sources. They force a radical reassessment of the timing, ecology, and environmental setting of the fish tetrapod transition, as well as the completeness of the body fossil record. It will cause a significant reappraisal of our understanding of tetrapod origins. We thought we'd pin down the origin of limbed tetrapods. We'll have to rethink the whole thing. These results force us to reconsider our whole picture of the transition from fish to land animals. So all the hooting and hollering and jeering and song singing about embracing your inner fish must have all seemed a little silly now to people that had been beating their chest about this rock-solid evidence that destroyed those silly creationist arguments. Now, even though good old Tiktaalik is dead in the water, pun intended, as proof of a transitional form, I wonder how many people that were caught up in the hype even know it's been tossed out. Most will likely never know, and just keep thinking the evidence for evolution keeps getting stronger with every new discovery they hear on the news. And what about the Christians out there who were so swayed by the overwhelming evidence that they caved and accepted the idea of theistic evolution, that God used billions of years of death, suffering, and disease to create and then called it very good, all before Adam sinned? And what about those who used to profess Christ and then became convinced that science had disproven the Bible and walked away from the faith altogether? Christians need to stand on the authority of God's Word and not be swayed by the evolutionary stories that constantly come and go, no matter how impressive they may seem at the time. Just like your friend or family member that can tell a good yarn, by asking a few good questions, you'll often find out the truth is far from the fanciful tale you first heard. As Proverbs 18:17 says, "The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him."